My name is Kristýna Šteflová. I am a senior campaigns officer at the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and I've just started that role about a month ago. So I've always had an interest in like social justice, bit of a social justice warrior, snowflake, whatever you want to call it. I've lived like around in lots of different countries with my parents' jobs, moving us around. So I went to international schools and just learned a lot about the world from kind of a young age. I just always felt really angry at injustice and just like based on where you're born, you have certain rights or not, or just lots like always thought a lot about like privilege and disadvantage. And then at university, I got really into activism and I studied documentary making for social change. That was amazing, and just made me realize that like this is what I want to do. And yeah, luckily I found great jobs in London working for charities in loads of different sectors like creative industries, criminal justice sector, and then poverty. And now that's where I'm at. And yeah, I can't really see myself doing any other job, to be honest. So I'm working on a big national campaign called Guarantee Our Essentials, and that's run with the Trussell Trust as well as the Joseph Rowntree Foundation. Basically, the aim is to improve universal credit and make sure that people in poverty and in deep poverty, like destitution, are able to afford the cost of essentials. But my role is a new role in the JRF team where I will work with other charities specifically or other organizations to kind of bring together the poverty sector and kind of make a bigger splash. I want to harness the power of the anti-poverty sector. So it's about working with other organizations, whether that's like with their lived experience stories that they hear and people they work with, or maybe doing some local engagements with if they have local branches, or like if they have mailing lists and things. So there'll be different ways. It's like mobilizing. I guess it is mobilizing the public through those organizations, but also using the voices of the organizations themselves. In my previous role as campaigner at Independent Age, I actually hadn't had like a pure campaigns role until that point. I'd done different bits around public affairs, advocacy, comms, and so I kind of felt like that would be a really good sort of way to upskill myself and feel more confident. Like I was going from a comms job to the campaigns job, and I was looking at kind of training I could do myself in the meantime. And I came across this and I just thought it was amazing, but it was too expensive for me to do it by myself. Yeah. And then when I started my campaigns job, my manager actually sent a link to me of the carousel and said, oh, have a look at this if you want to do it. And I was like, oh my God, yes, like 100%. I got loads of things from the training. There's loads of like very practical tools that I still like thinking about change and like pulling the levers in that way, and mapping it onto a bit of a grid. Like that's something that I kind of do now instinctively, like at the start of a project or when I'm thinking about a campaign, like where would this plot, like where's the audience, who's helping, who's not helping, like the public, private. Like that's so helpful. The problem tree, I still remember that, kind of looking at like the solutions and the root causes and issues and how you get there from there to there. Stuff about like theory of change, like the kind of diagrams. I'm quite like a visual learner and thinker, so those kinds of tools were so helpful. The main thing actually, like in my current job, and I think going forward, is like just the people that I've met through the course. And now that I'm working in a very sort of collaborative, like relationship-y role, there's so many people that I've come across that have done the Campaigns Carousel, or that I met through there, or I'll know someone in the organization because I did something with them. And I think that's kind of the main thing for me that I found like that valuable. And then obviously like just feeling a bit more confident as a campaigner and realizing like, oh yeah, like I know about this, or I've thought about this before. But it's in those spaces like especially in the breakout rooms of all the training, is like when you get to chat to people about things, that's what like sort of embeds all the knowledge or your own thoughts. You're like, oh yeah, I have some like valid ideas. The Resilient Campaigner. I remember that one came at like a really, really good time for me when I needed a little bit of like kind of learning how to yeah, I guess it sounds so cheesy, but like, yeah, look after yourself so you can do the work. And at the time I was working on poverty and older age and like speaking to a lot of people that are affected, and I was finding it really hard with like cost of living crisis just being everywhere. When it like it's like what you're working on like 9 to 5 is also like something that's very real outside of that. um yeah, I think I found that quite tough. Knowing that I had that session coming up, I was like, okay, I'll learn some skills there. But yeah, I just remember that being like a really helpful session and feeling like a lot more kind of understood. And just again, that thing about understanding that loads of other people are struggling with it as well, and you don't feel so alone or like disconnected. Yeah. There was, I can't remember exactly which session it was. I think it was about digital. It might have been like a kind of broad one about just digital. The facilitator like went through examples of like how to write a good campaigns email. I think it was just really helpful to kind of see. It was like an example about not making it about like you or the problem, making it about like the person that you're trying to reach and like why they should care and how they can make a difference, and just like outlining sort of like having a structure of like problem, solution, action. I remember going back to that slide like quite a lot because I wrote a lot of emails to campaigners. And I would just always like, if I was feeling like, oh, there's something a bit off with this one, I would go back to that and just think, oh, am I like following this sort of structure, or like am I making it too much about like us, like independent age or JRF? Why should they care? You know, like obviously I care a lot, but yeah, just like kind of switching the focus on like why it's important to them or what they can do about it, rather than like we need you to do this and help us with this. For me, I think it has to be the confidence and believing in my own sort of takes on things and campaigning. I think there's a lot of, I don't think I did the module, but there was one about sort of getting internal buy-in for a campaign. And I think there's a lot of that usually in an organization. You'll be like part of a small team that's like your one campaigner or maybe two if you're lucky. So you have to sometimes like push back or try and get your own vision across, or like your own strategy. And I think before the carousel, I kind of would just go with whatever was like asked of me, but then I think I kind of learned to develop my own like voice and take on things and just learn to back myself a bit more. I found it engaging, especially with like the lots of breakout rooms, lots of space to chat to people. Yeah, like supportive. Like I would say it's kind of like a supportive crowd, and then having those sort of like brunch events after you finish the carousel, and having those places where you can like touch base with people. There's always an interesting talk. Like I think it always feels like a very, yeah, like a supportive sort of space. I met so many great people. And I don't think I would have without it. We have, yeah, we caught up a few times. We had a few sort of like cups of tea, and every now and then we'll just like there'll be a question about like, oh, has anyone used like a giant billboard outside of Parliament? Like, how did you do it? What company did you use? And then someone will say like, oh yeah, we did this like a few months ago. So like it's kind of more like shouts in the darkness. But then there's other people who I'm a bit more in touch with, or will email, or when I got the new role, there were loads of people coming and saying like, oh, congrats, and we'll work together probably on this thing. So yeah, I think there'll be more people that I actually am in touch with now in this role as well. The carousel is really, really useful if you are feeling like maybe you want to have like a sort of all-rounder knowledge of campaigning. So I wanted more like campaign specific, like I guess language and frameworks and I really got that, as well as networks, like I mentioned. But yeah, I think if you want to have a kind of all-rounder, like solid base for campaigning and for like learning what you kind of might already know about, but like having the confidence to then
Yeah.
go forward in your own work, like I think it would be really useful.